It is not perfect yet. I actually believe, just like I'm sure you've heard this concept, that if you wait until something's perfect to put it out, you have waited too long and you have missed part of the market share.
Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Win the Hour, Win the Day. And I am your host, Chris Ward. And today we have Jen Grosso in the house, and she's going to talk to us about how to beat perfectionism. So I am really eager to dive into this one because I'm going to tell you, I misunderstood this like a lot. I didn't understand what it meant. I didn't self-diagnose properly. There's just so many things about this whole muck of information that I didn't get. So I'm looking forward to this. Jen, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Chris. I'm so excited to talk about this topic. It's near and dear to my heart. I'm a recovering perfectionist myself, someone who's get caught up in procrastination. And if I can help your high achieving, amazing business owners get past it like I have, I think that we're going to do a lot of good work for them today.
Yeah. So let's start at the beginning. I didn't understand for a long time what perfectionism meant. I thought it was really just working on something. Maybe I was a perfectionist about being a perfectionist. I don't know. I thought it meant working on something till you thought it was perfect. And I thought there was some ego in that. Oh yeah. Okay. Now it's good. It's perfect. It's done. And it was like not so long ago that I sadly figured out, oh no, it's when you're fussing around and monkeying around on something that like this banner or this color on this sales page is just, and really that's not the point of what you're doing. And you're trying to whatever, launch a product or sell a course or do whatever. And you're monkeying around with something so minute, trying to just get it right. And I thought that was just trying to be professional. And it took me a lot of years before I understood, like, what's the end goal here? Get it done, get it up, get it out. And the whole concept, what somebody else in the show would talk about agile marketing. And she was reminding us all about how the software industry, they put out things all the time that, don't work or flawed. And we sign up and pay for the next version of it. So we all know that. And yet when it comes time to putting our own stuff out, I know it's, shoulders back, try to look like professional and get it all right. And that really is perfectionism, which is handcuffing us.
Oh, it absolutely does. And I think what happened for me, I was originally an attorney way back once upon a time. And there's so much about our culture that is involved in creating this belief that perfectionism will get you everywhere. Even it's one of the most common things that people will say as a flaw about themselves. I'm a perfectionist, right? So people will think that they're amazing and they're going to do an incredible job.
Right.
And I started working with really high level people, entrepreneurs who are doing really well, and exploring what's the root cause of the perfectionism. Let's get down to what's causing this in the first place so we stop doing it. Because perfectionism, like you said, it creates this handcuff. It means you never produce anything, you never get it out. And perfectionism is really rooted in fear. And it's really rooted in fear of what people might think about you, that people might think that the mistakes that you're making are going to prevent you from moving forward in your business. And it starts holding you back, and it's an internal stress response to worrying about what others think and worrying about whether or not who you are and what you're doing in the world is worthy enough to be put out yet. And like you said, I love that example. There's version 1.0, then we learn from that. We learn from what didn't work. We learn from what customers want, how to translate that, make that better. And then we have version 2, and then we keep going. And only those who can recognize the perfectionism inside of them, what that's about. All right, this is just me. If I'm feeling the tendency to mess around and try to work on the details endlessly, and I'm not releasing something, let me have some self-awareness about this. Why am I showing some perfectionism here? I must be afraid on some level that what I'm doing is not worthy enough, that I'm not worthy enough, or that it's related to this fear on the inside. And so if you can recognize that in yourself, you can then take a step back, take a deep breath, and then analyze, all right, let me
jump in. Hold on. Let me jump in, because I think you brought up some really super good points. And I've talked about this before in the show, but I know when I was doing the cover to this podcast and I put it into a group on Facebook to say, and you know what, I wasn't really, honestly, I wasn't looking for their opinion. I was, you know what? I was looking for their praise. I was looking for them to say, oh, this is great. La, 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 right?
Validation.
Yeah. And I also was looking that it's a great way to promote that this podcast was coming. Hey, I'm
Sure.
working on this cover. The podcast is coming. I know I have to market it. And here is me marketing through the side door. So I put the podcast cover up and they ripped it to shreds. It was vicious, right? This is unnecessary. It's just a cover. Come on, man. And I remember thinking for a moment, the old me would have taken that down right away. I would have been like, oh my gosh, I didn't do it right. I embarrassed myself. I wasn't ready. And because I don't necessarily align myself with the word fear, because I don't usually do things and avoid things because of fear. Because I think that once you go down this lane instead of that lane because you're afraid, who the heck knows where you're going to end up. So I go ahead, fear or not, right?
Yes.
But when you're speaking now, I do realize there is a different, we associate the word fear with, oh, I'm afraid I won't do it. I was fearful. I didn't do my homework. I wasn't ready.
Yes.
I didn't prepare this properly. And so that changes the game. It's, oh, I'm trying to be professional and grown up and my business, maybe with the podcast, I'm new to the podcast world. So apparently I don't know what goes on a cover, which again, may I just sidebar tell you too, when we did change the cover, then a couple later, somebody commented, why do you now try smiling with your mouth closed? What the hell are you, my mother? This is no longer positive feedback. This is a preference and we're not dating. I also have to disqualify which is valid feedback and helpful and just foolishness, right? So that was the thing too, is I thought, oh, I'm new to the podcast community. I'm showing my ignorance. They didn't like the cover. So now I can gravitate towards the word fear, which I couldn't before. Because I think you're right. Then you overthink it and you just take your toys and go home.
Absolutely. And I think we've talked once before about confidence too, that sometimes I don't think that people are completely fearless or that someone is totally not confident in something. I think that we have different levels based on different things. And just like you said, for some people, they're very fearful about or not confident based on what people might think of them. Others take that on a certain topic or a certain type of work they're going to put out in their world and they internalize it. Just like you said, did I do enough? And I think that some of the advice that so many of us have received for so long is you have to fake it until you make it. I think that promotes perfectionism because if you're trying to fake it, you don't know what to do. You're constantly like, all right, I could add this, I could do this, I could stack this. And you're trying to make it appear that you're supposed to be where you are at that moment. And I agree with you that perfectionism really rears its ugly head quite a bit when we're trying to break into a new area and we're trying to level up and do something new. Can really hold you back for sure. So one of the tips and tools that I use with my clients so they can perform better is I want them to take a step back, recognize that it's happening. I'm spending too much time in the weeds, in the details, trying to perfect this. Do I really need to? Is there really a gap right now? Or am I at a level where this needs to be released? Just like the piece of technology. Do we need to release this? Is this at its minimum basic viability? So I talked to them about that. Your MBV is what I need to put out into the world at its minimum basic viability. If it's not, sometimes people are like, do it messy, do it afraid. I love that advice to a degree. Sometimes you can put something out that's too messy. So we're trying to find that Goldilocks place of being competent enough to put something out that it will be taken seriously, meeting it, and sometimes you need some objective feedback, not all feedback, just objective feedback.
Yeah.
And then you put it out there in the world and be comfortable with the fact that it is not perfect yet. I actually believe, just like I'm sure you've heard this concept, that if you wait until something's perfect to put it out, you have waited too long and you have missed part of the market share. Yeah. So honestly, aiming for somewhere around 85% of what you think would be perfect is probably right for you.
I don't even know. I know I couldn't do it, but let's say 50, 60% is even better too, because I also think like now when you know, and I say that, and I'm not telling you what to do. I'm saying like to be more forgiving with yourself. And I think now too, if I put something up, let's say a sales page or we updated our website and then somebody says, oh, there's a typo. I say now, oh, thank you. Fresh eyes always see everything. Or they say after you hit print or send, that's when you see all the typos. But before I'd be mortified. And I'll tell you, the turning point for me was this, everybody lean in. So
I'm
So
leaning.
my husband had passed away. So I was off social media for 2 years. I mean, off. I didn't check it. I had nothing to say and I didn't care what other people had to say. I'm just in my little cocoon getting through. And when I finally came back on and I was like, all right, I have a business. There's no way for me to get through this, the duration of this business without ever going on social media at all, ever again. So I put some post letting people know I'm back. And yes, I've been away, but the business has been going. It's just been going without me. Right. So I put this post and I had something like and I had done a typo. It was supposed to be YOU''RE. And so here's this post about, and people were saying, oh, it's so good to see you back, Chris. We were worried about you. We knew you were still doing business, but we hadn't seen you here. And then there's this one that says, you have a typo. I'm like, okay, you missed the point. Thank you.
Yeah.
So I realized if you are going to critique me on my first post back after my husband passes away about the you and the your, and it wasn't that he explained how you use the two different yours. Clearly it was a typo. Like, hello.
Of course.
But he explained how you use them. And I thought, okay, you can't take people's feedback seriously because this is nuts. Right.
No.
And that kind of sobered me up afterwards. When people say, here's your mistake, I go, oh yeah, okay, fine. No biggie.
It's so funny that you bring that up. I think that's such a great one because people do that all the time. They feel really superior to take someone down because they made a mistake grammatically. I was the managing editor of the New Jersey Constitutional Law Journal. I had a whole team. We put out something and it had 2 mistakes in it. And I nearly had a heart attack. How did we all miss it? How was all this stuff? And I ended up talking to someone who was a mentor who had been an editor in a much better publication, who was, go read the New York Times, go read any book anywhere ever. Nothing is perfect. I loved that job. I had that job when I was in my early 20s. I love that I did that because it taught me that perfectionism gets you nowhere. The material never gets out. You don't have the luxury of waiting for perfection because you will be beaten to the punch with the material that gets out there. Now, yes, you want it to be amazing, but you can't. And then there was a study that was done by some university, and it was a psychological study. And my favorite part of it is, I'll send it to you so you can have it. It was something about how people who are willing to publicly out you for your grammatical mistakes, they're more likely to be a jerk.
Yeah.
There you go. It's science.
Because you know what? I've had where there's been mistakes before, and then you can tell the difference because somebody will send you a direct message and they say, hey, Chris, I don't know if you saw this or anyone's pointed it out yet, but and they're doing it with warmth and intention, not trying to steal your thunder or humiliate you. Hey, I can take all the feedback I can get. Please help me catch my mistakes, but you don't need to do that in a way that to point and make somebody feel silly. Absolutely. Okay. So we can't be afraid of these people because they obviously have more time on their hands than we do anyhow.
No, and that's about them, and that's about their own issues, their own internal issues. I do want to jump back really quick to what I said about 85%. You said maybe 50 or 60. So what I want to point out is, for the people I have come to me where perfectionism is their thing, right? We all have issues that prevent us. And if you find that you're someone who's really a perfectionist and you're aware, this is a problem, it's holding me back in my business, it's slowing me down. Going to 50 or 60% might be too much of a leap. You don't need to. You just dial back to 85%. And I promise you, if you dial back to 85% over time, you'll then be able to put something out at 50 or 60% because you will have expanded your nervous system's capacity. A lot of this has to do with our biology. It has to do with how we react to stress responses. And so if you condition yourself to being able to taking those baby steps of putting things out there that you don't think are perfect, over time, as you become more comfortable with that, you then can get a little bit more comfortable with putting out a little bit less.
You're right. So let's make a note here. Jen knows what she's doing with her clients and Chris doesn't know what she's doing with Jen's clients. No, that's a really good point too, because I have a client of mine, we were just talking about something totally different. Yeah. He was doing his presentation in front of a group of people and he realized that there was a typo in the slides. And the way he describes it, I think he almost had a heart attack. Like he like his heart was beating fast. He was like, oh my gosh, like I would have been, I've tripped on going up the stage going, all right, then. Okay, here we are. It doesn't mean that there's things that don't cause me and get me stressed out or whatever, but I have learned to roll with it. And if you can't laughing at myself, it just breathes life into the room. But there are some people that you're right. It's crippling for them, crippling.
That's right.
But even for us regular people, I think regular people, I don't know what the hell I'm talking about here, but what I mean is, I think for somebody that I would describe myself as pretty level in temperament, pretty always looking at the positive side of things.
Right.
Even for us, I would think that you get caught up in, oh, I went to college, I went to university, and I've been in business all these years. And so I'm trying to be a professional. And so you get caught up in what you think the expectations or the benchmark is.
Sure.
Yeah.
And it's assessing, again, that minimum basic. What do I need to be putting out here? And then it's catching yourself, having enough self-awareness, noticing your thoughts. Am I getting caught up here? Am I spending too much time doing something because I'm trying to talk myself out of putting this work out there because I don't think it's perfect enough? It's actually like, take a break from that. Very often it's difficult. So I would say, take a break, take an assessment, decide if you do need a trusted advisor, maybe not putting it out onto the internet. By the way, I love that you put out your cover onto the internet as a piece. I think that's perfect. I've done that too. But also just when it's a perfectionism problem, when you know that's actually holding you back and you're at that stage in your career and you need to get to the next level, that's when you might need to have an objective person who looks at this and goes, is this good enough so that I can put it out there, so that I can get with the full knowledge, what I'm putting out there, I expect what I'm putting out there, I'm going to need to get feedback, so that I'm going to need to create my version 2, my version 3, what have you.
Yeah. Okay. So where do we start? What are some of the things that we can do better with this? Or how do we know, is 1 week focus on, here's one of there's so many things jump to my mind, is one of the things I'm really passionate about is to-do lists are just lists of percolating emergencies, right? So I'm all about your calendar is your time bank account. Yes. And that everything you do has to be on your calendar or broken down into 1 hour chunks. And one of the benefits to that is then when you're working on something and then you're like, okay, I didn't get that today, or I have to proof that one more time, you have to copy it or move it to next week. So you can start to see, if it's just on a to-do list, you don't realize I've left that now for 5 months. That on the calendar, oh, I have to add another, this is still not done. I have to put that on next week. So you start to see that. And I think that's part of the problem too, where I talk to people about, our clients always say we get them 25 hours back a week within the first month of working with us. And a lot of that is just work that they're not holding accountable, and they don't even know how long they've been procrastinating on something.
Absolutely. And that's procrastinate. So I can talk about procrastination too. It's slightly different from perfectionism, but
procrastinating, getting it out. That's what I mean. So you're right. They're two different things. Yeah. I'm talking about procrastinating to put it out because it's not perfect.
Because it's not perfect.
Yeah. See, these words matter to her. We're just throwing them around.
They tie.
You're right. They make the difference.
They tie in an interesting way. So what happens with perfectionism when you're in that place? Perfectionism creates all of this stress. So having a system like a calendaring system where you're required to do exactly what you're talking about, you're required not only to write it down, but then, okay, if I haven't done it, I have to move it to the following week.
Yeah.
I've used success trackers with my clients and things like that, where they are required to move things over and identify what hasn't been done, looking at them, breaking down a bigger goal into the micro goals. So I was talking about maybe you're putting out an article and breaking that down into various things. What do I need to be doing? What are the steps that I need to do? Writing the article.
Yeah, we call that working backwards, because too many times you dive into a project, but really if you say, all right, we do this in our personal life. Like you say, okay, I got to be at whatever, my friend's house at noon for lunch. She lives an hour away. It's going to take me an hour to get ready. All of a sudden you realize you have to be out the door at 10 for a lunch. So you work backwards. So I tell people to do that with their projects as well.
Absolutely. So working backwards, creating micro goals related to whatever it is that you're trying to put out there, that will help you take that step back and assess what you're doing. Do I have too many here? Is this going to take me too much time? Am I really spending the right amount of time on it? That's a great way to assess whether or not you're spending too much time in that perfectionism bubble. And when you have to see it on paper that you've done, this is what I've been doing, and it's taking up far more time than it would allow. Now, where that gets tricky is if it's something new or something that you may not know if you're being efficient about it. You may not know how long it might normally take to do that type of a task. And that's where you have to involve others. You have to do a little bit of research on that. So you were saying, like, when you first put out the podcast, whenever we're first doing something, it often takes us longer, but we also don't know what's normal. How long would it normally take me to edit a podcast? And then I'm sure you have people who,
do all that. Let me move you ahead to something, because I think it's important, because we're not talking just in theory. There's neuroscience behind this.
Oh, absolutely. Yes. So what you were talking about too, where the neuroscience really comes in, is that procrastination part too. It really comes in there as well in a big way. So with perfectionism in general, there's a lot of stress chemicals that are created. And some of it is, so it's very much in a circle. Some of the perfectionism is caused because we're stressed and fearful about what we might do. But the more we are engaged in perfectionist practices and more we act like a perfectionist, the more that raises our cortisol, because you end up taking too much time to do something and stressing your deadlines or overworking and putting yourself in a place where you are not as calm about something.
So it's kind of like stretching the elastic. You're putting more and more strain on it.
Yeah, by being a perfectionist, you're taking something that should have, let's say, a level 5 of difficulty. You are expanding it up to an 8 or a 9 or a 10. And if that's the way you operate in the world in general, in your business, you're going to make your business a lot more stressful, which here's where procrastination comes in. Why do they procrastinate to put it out? Because procrastination, in a neuroscience way, is a method of stress relief.
Okay. Oh, I see. Okay.
So the reason people procrastinate is not because they're lazy. It's not necessarily because they're terrible at time management. The reason people procrastinate is because it delays the stress they think they're going to feel.
Okay. Yeah.
So the outcome of procrastination, the reason, like, why do we engage in a behavior that we know is often terrible for us? We know we're going to buck up against deadlines. We know that procrastination causes people financial stress, right? Because they procrastinate on getting things done, and then they don't bring in the money or get the money that they need to get. It can cause deadlines. It can cause stress from making people upset that you didn't get them. Maybe you're delivering work to a client and
I couldn't take the stress of procrastinating. And that was like my saving point in university, when everybody else was leaving essays to the last minute. I'm like, I can't live like that. I can't say that tomorrow I have to write an essay that I should have had 2 months to write. Or what if I slipped and fell and hurt my arm? They'll say, well, you fell yesterday. What have you been doing for the last 8 weeks?
You didn't
my nerves couldn't take procrastination.
So that's one of the things too, as we could get into that talk. It's really, when I work with clients too, there's very high performing clients, people who are high achievers, I have to assess what's going on with them. How do they respond to stress? So most of the reason I deal with perfectionism, procrastination, is those are just two things that cause people stress. So if I was working with you, I would know you're not going to procrastinate, but what is causing you stress specifically? We would look at that for you in particular. But so many people, about 50% of people is the estimate, that are high achievers will engage in procrastination practices at times. And the reason behind that is it's an attempt to delay stress. This is not necessarily logical, by the way.
No, it makes sense, because I'm not a big procrastinator on so many levels. I get stuff done. However, so I would say, compared to somebody else, I might be at 2% procrastination, but I know, to the point, again, with the calendar, I've been saying I'm going to be doing lives on LinkedIn and TikTok and stuff. And for one reason after another, one, I will tell you, is not my fault. We had the first ever hurricane in Canada. So 10 days of electricity is a justified reason why we didn't do that. But anyhow, sure. But then still, I realized this week, like, listen to my team, I can't move this on the calendar one more week. So by the time this airs, there better be freaking lives out there, because I can't do this. I said we're going to do it. And so now it's in my face again, back to the calendar. But I do realize I wasn't excited about it. I was doing it because I thought I should do it. And then lucky for me, I meet amazing people like you on the show. We just interviewed somebody today that was talking about lives. So now I'm excited. Okay, I think I can do this. But I was putting it off because I was going to do it because I thought I should, not because I wanted to. So you're right. You can justify the procrastination, even if it takes a hurricane.
Yeah, absolutely. So when you look at procrastination, it's when you break it down again, I love to get to the root cause of things. Why are things happening? Because if we just put band-aids on the symptoms, ultimately you'll go back to the habit. Because what happens is the habit of the procrastination is a habit and it gets hardwired into our brain as a stress relief response. Okay. And so look at it this way. You have a trigger, something that's stressful, something that you know that then says, okay, I'm going to respond to this by avoiding doing it so that I don't have to be stressed right now. And I'm going to choose something else to do in its place. Sometimes even what you choose might be productive.
So then you can really justify that. Yes,
you can justify it instead. And you're delaying. It ends up being this monkey on your back because you know it's coming. And so instead, and then the benefit you get is that you have this momentary stress relief response. And it gives you like a shot of, let's say you go and you do something that feels comfortable to you, like social media posting, that gives you a dopamine boost, which is a chemical in your brain that makes you feel good. So often you'll choose something in the avoidance that gives you this chemical brain boost. And ultimately that avoidance gives you this stress relief. Now, that stress will skyrocket when you get to the point where you have no choice but to do it. So going back to it's so fascinating you brought up the exams. Lots of studies been on students because we all have this friend that you spoke to in school that was like, I don't study until the last day because that's when I do my best work and that's when it all gets in there, right? What that is also they trained their brain to respond to the adrenaline that comes in from massive amounts of stress. And then that's when they will be productive. That's when they will get into that hyper-focused state. Now, that sort of works for people in college. If that's how you operate your whole life, by the time you're in your 40s, you're trying to run a business, you now have all this overabundance of stress chemicals. Like
you're not fun to be around.
You're not fun to be around. And the triggers are more significant, more severe. So we're always going to have these stress triggers, right? So always we're going to, especially as life gets bigger and more complicated for entrepreneurs who've been in business for a while, you have bigger problems. Maybe you have something that happens and you know you have to address it. And if there's a way to put it, if you are someone who procrastinates and that's how you respond to stress and you put it on the shelf, if you can recognize that about yourself and say, okay, this is just my normal habit of responding to this stressful situation instead. So what can you do about that? It's first of all, look at what are my thoughts around this that are causing me to say, I can put this off. Now, sometimes it's a circumstance. The triggers can be internal or external, right? It could be something that makes you feel inside a stressor, but it could also be something like you're talking about, external, like a hurricane in Canada. What on earth? I'm sure that's stressing a lot of people out in what it delayed in their business. But then it's immediately, am I going to go into a place of avoidance, which you did not? So even though you delayed the work, you didn't go into a place of avoidance completely. It was, when can I reschedule this? So one of the ways to respond to it, instead of completely avoiding the stress and that being your habitual response, it would be, all right, I'm going to take a deep breath here. What is one immediate action I can take that will move this forward? And the quicker you can get to that action, even using I'm not sure if you're familiar with Mel Robbins and her 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, take an action method. But if you can get your brain to take an action, any action can be a very tiny micro action, like moving something in the calendar, that will help you beat procrastination over time and put you into a habit of responding with action rather than avoidance. And it'll help create new neural pathways where you respond quickly. And the reason, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, I'll give you, this is based in neuroscience. Your brain can't talk you out of doing something in less than 5 seconds. So if you just get into action in 5 seconds, you are 80% of people who take action that quickly and will continue on for doing like whatever their action is for just a couple of minutes, they will usually continue rather than go back into that place of avoidance.
Okay, that makes something that we can use today.
Oh yeah.
All right, with our 5 seconds, everybody, what we're going to do is we're going to find out, where can we reach Jen Grosso? Where can we find more of your excellence?
You can find, so I am the founder and CEO of the Bold Fire Institute. So you can find me at boldfireinstitute.com. You can also find me on Instagram, jengrosso.co, and you can find me on Facebook as well.
Excellent. All right, Jen, this has been a treat. I really opened my eyes to a lot of things. Everyone else, we will see you in the next episode.